Good morning, my name is Josh Wallace and I'm doing a presentation on how to improve ACT benchmark scores in math. This is for our Capstone Presentation for instructional leadership, and we will doing the benchmark score will be dealing with Sardis High School. The reason that we're doing this, the purpose of this is to improve benchmark scores on the ACT. If we look at a lot of the data on the ACT, we need to improve teacher instruction. We also need to improve our school-wide plan of implementing ACT math test and standards, and to look at implementing this during the district on the district level. The rationale is we've got to identify the issues. What are the issues? Why are the math scores on the ACT, why are the students not benchmarking? Also, we need to find the purpose and a solution for this. We also need to find a reason and a solution to and a plan to correct this issue. And it will involve stakeholders, students, everybody in the school, staff, teachers, district level personnel to implement this plan. Sardis High School is a 5A school located in Etowah County, Alabama. Sardis High School has roughly 540 students. They have 31 teachers, 2 administrators, and 2 counselors, with a staff of around 45 staff members dealing with lunchroom, custodial staff, and aides. Sardis High School has grown drastically over the last 5 years. They went from a 3A to 5A, which that means the numbers have almost doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. Okay, the demographics. The student population at Sardis High School is predominantly white. About 90% of the students are white. You have a small percentage of African Alaskans and American Indians. You have less than 1% that are Asian. You have almost 1% that are black or African American. You have less than 1% of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. And then you have about 5% that is multi-raced. As far as student population, we wanted to look at students with disabilities, low socioeconomic status, military, transient people, male and female. 11% of the student population are classified with a learning disability. We also have 88.78% that are general ed students, so it has a low number of special ed students. The SES, the socioeconomic status, 49% of the students receive free and reduced lunch. Or free and reduced breakfast. That is a high percentage, which makes Sardis a Title I school, which they receive federal funds for that Title I program. A small percent of military students, less than 1%. About 48% are females and 52% are males. Okay, in dealing with our problem, we wanted to look at why the students did not make benchmark on the ACT in math. The benchmark score in math is a 22 for them to be considered benchmark, which deals with career and college readiness standards. If you look over the last 3 years comparison, in 2017, 23% of the students made benchmark on the ACT. In 2019 and 20, only 16%. So that number has dropped from 23 to 16%. And then 2019 and 20, only 11.8% of the students benchmarked in math, which that means they made less than a 22 on the math section. Also, if you look in 2017 and 18, almost 80% scored a 0 to 21, which is less than benchmark. In 2018, almost 85% scored 0 to 20 on the benchmark. And in 2019, you have almost 90% of the students that did not benchmark in math at Sardis High School. That is our problem. That is what we're looking to solve, and that is what our task force team is going to try to find and rectify. Who does this negatively impact? Number one, it negatively impacts the students. Students that do not benchmark in math or any subject, they may not be college and career ready. They may not meet the standards for college and career readiness. It also impacts the teachers and administration of the school. It adds additional stress where extra professional development or the State Department or district level personnel come in and try to provide more of an understanding of what they need to be doing. So it adds extra stress. It also adds negatively impacts the community or the stakeholders of the school. How does it do that? Well, if you have new businesses and industries that come in and new stakeholders wanting to come in, if students are not progressing well on standardized tests, they may see your school in a negative light and not want to attend your school. It also, the benefits of this, it can provide extra additional scholarship money for students, which helps the students, but it also helps the parents, which are stakeholders, to not have to find financial gains or put them in financial woes when providing to pay for college or to pay for a career path. It also can help the community because it can increase growth in industry, it can increase growth in student population, or even population in the school. Okay, our task force was made up of administrators, history teachers, special education teachers, students, math coaches that are on the district level. We also had CIP coordinators and parents and 2 special education teachers that worked on our task force to try to solve our problem of not benchmarking on the ACT. Okay, the limitations and decision-making process. One major limitation was resources. Well, how do we define resources? Time and money was a major resource that's needed to provide additional help to teachers and students to make sure that they're getting the necessary instruction to be able to benchmark on the ACT. Also, the knowledge that teachers have in presenting ACT material. We found that it was very limited, that the math teachers knew exactly or how to teach the instruction to increase those benchmark scores. And also teacher buy-in. It is a very daunting task for teachers to break down information from standardized tests or regular yearly supplemental tests to find out what the student actually needs. So getting teachers to buy into this process was very, very important. And if you notice, the function and role of data in school is to improve the process and is often poorly defined. And that's what we found, that this process, we know that there is a process when trying to rectify these limitations, but it's poorly defined, and most of the time it is confused and it does not go to fruition. People do not see it to the end. Okay, decision making. For the entire group, when we're developing this plan, it has to be a consensus. All task member force have to agree on what plan we're going to implement. And if any member does not agree on what we're implementing, then we'll table it or put it back on the table for more discussion to try to rectify those issues. Step 5, the 3 criteria of what we're looking at to try to implement to improve these benchmark math scores on the ACT. We're going to use the Scantron Performance Universal Screening to find out which students are in need of additional instruction or on the cusp. They're almost to that 22 point. We're also going to use pre-ACT to define what their projected benchmark would be when they're in the younger grades, or if they're on the bubble, if they're teetering with a 22 to benchmark. And then we'll also use the ACT score, which is looking at 22 or higher on math to see if they benchmark or they do not. Okay, our solutions. We're presenting 3 solutions for the task force team to discuss. Common planning for math teachers means all math teachers would have the same period as planning, and that way we could do professional development during that planning period. We could have vertical and horizontal team meetings for the math teachers to try to implement a better instruction on all grade levels, 9 through 12. We also looked at putting all students in ACT prep classes, starting with the 9th grade. We have an ACT prep class now, but that's only for 11th graders, which we kind of thought that was a limitation because it may be too late to rectify some of these problems in math. And then we looked at putting all students that were on the cusp, on the bubble, or in need of additional help in math enrichment classes. Okay, where did we get feedback? How did we get our feedback on determining what proposal that we want to present. We used Google Forms. In those Google Forms, we got feedback from teachers, regular ed teachers, general ed teachers, special education teachers, counselors, students, parents, and many stakeholders to try to find out what they felt was the best plan. That's where our feedback came from to implement this proposal. Okay, in the decision making of the proposed solution, we used a universal screener or pre-ACT. That told us if students were in need, on the cusp of being benchmarked, or where they fell, or on the bubble. So what we are presenting, what the task force team is presenting, is to place every student in the 9th grade in math enrichment classes. So they would actually have 2 classes of math each year, but the enrichment class, we would develop curriculum and a course outline for the teacher to teach directly that it correlates with the ACT. That is what the task force team is presenting. Okay, once we've presented this, we have to look at how we're going to implement it. Okay, in the year before, in spring, in March through May, the administrators and counselors are going to develop a tentative schedule to define and to implement 5 additional math enrichment classes. Okay, in April and May, the intervention teachers will take the data from the pre-ACT, ACT, STAR Math, and find these students that need the math enrichment class, which is very important. If they've benchmarked or they're showing progress, we want them to continue on the path they're on. If they're not, we want them to have the math enrichment class. In the summertime, the administrators and counselors, with the help of math teachers, will develop a curriculum and a course outline that all 5 math enrichment teachers will teach, and it will be dated, and they'll have certain timelines that they have to teach certain things from the math ACT prep class or enrichment class. And then the math teachers will implement this beginning in August when school starts, and this will be implemented for an entire school year. This math enrichment class will provide instructions, remediations, tutoring for an entire school year. That is our implementation of increasing ACT scores in math. How are we going to evaluate this? Well, we're going to use the performance series, which is a web-based series that we're giving 3 times a year so we can pull data from that. We're going to do surveys from the stakeholders, the students, and the math teachers and parents. We're going to give those 2 times a year to gather information. They're also going to be progress monitored weekly. Each week, they will go into a computer lab. They will progress monitor on the curriculum that we've presented, and that will tell us if there's growth, if there's not growth, and the areas of focus, the objectives that we need to focus on. And we will use the ACT when they take it. If they take it at school, which is in the 11th grade, or if they take it outside of the school setting, we will pull those ACTs each year to see how they are improving. Okay, modifications. Many times when you implement a plan, things do not go exactly like you like them to. Well, we want to be able to put this back on the table every year, and the task force team implement changes if necessary. But the first initial implementation of this will be an entire year. Okay, throughout that year, we will compile the data from the ACT, pre-ACT, progress monitoring on STAR, and the performance series test. We'll compile that data, and at the end of the year, the task force will re-meet and revisit this plan of math enrichment classes to see if we need to change anything, what discussions need to be made, how can we make this better. And after that 1 year, with discussion from the task force team, we can make modifications for the next year. This is our references that I used throughout this presentation. Okay, this here is the appendix. This is what we voted on as the task force team. This is the 3 proposals that we had, and as you know that we placed the students in enrichment classes for an entire year, so that's what the consensus of the task force team told us. these are the standards that I felt like were very important through this. One of them, place children at the center of education. If we're doing this and trying to implement new standards and new curriculum to our students to improve them, we're placing their education at the center. And it's our responsibility to make sure students are academically growing and their well-being is being provided for. We also want to make sure that we're promoting practices that are consistent with knowledge of the child's learning and development. If a child is not learning on the pace that they should, we need to do extra help with them. And these math enrichment classes will create that extra tutoring, that remediation, and the progress monitoring will tell us how their growth is. So if we do that, then we're providing students the needs that they have in the education system. And it also, we encourage facilitated initiative improvements of programs and practices. This could improve not only our math enrichment classes, but it could improve the teaching from these teachers in the general ed classes. All right, thank you very much.